This week on Jerusalem Dateline, we take a special look at the history of the New Testament and the times of Jesus, examined in CBN's new documentary, Written in Stone. It uncovers the 2,000-year-old archaeology from the times of Jesus. Plus, Scott Ross tours Magdala, the home of Mary Magdalene, and Julie Stahl looks at Nazareth, the town where Jesus grew up. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. On this week's program, we'll look at the archaeological record of the life and times of Jesus of Nazareth. CBN Documentaries produced a stunning film on the archaeology behind the life of Jesus. Writer and director Aaron Zimmerman talked about the film Written in Stone, Jesus of Nazareth, with CBN CEO Gordon Robertson, who also hosted the documentary.
A survey, 22% of the respondents thought Jesus was a fictional character. Another 17% said they weren't sure. Of those who said Jesus was a real person, many thought he was a wise teacher, but not a divine one. The key question is, what does the archaeological record say? CBN's latest documentary, Written in Stone, reveals the answer.
So far from 150 years of archaeology, whatever we find either amends the Bible or is not related to the Bible, but it doesn't reject the Bible. None of it rejects any of the biblical stories.
We have a biblical tradition, and we have the archaeology, and the question is what the relationship between the two.
If you want to walk on the particular street where Jesus and the apostles walked on, this is the place you're going to go.
The story of the Church of the Nativity is really one that's quite interesting. Somewhere within that large compound was the family home, even though we may not know exactly where X marks the spot.
It makes sense for this place to be the place of the crucifixion.
Does it fit the right period? Does it show evidence of that era? We have to say this is a very strong case.
Today there are attempts to say that the real tomb of Jesus was elsewhere. When you read the Gospels, everything complies very well to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
The period is right, and the location is right.
There is no reason to look for another place.
When he came to Capernaum, he was home. He was in the house. Whose house? What house? If we have to give a grade, we're going to give this a B plus A minus. People know where Peter lived.
It was an ideal place for Jesus, and he walks between Nazareth and the lake to stop here. So was Jesus in the synagogue? I would say you'd need to be a very, very industrious person to prove he wasn't.
When Jesus comes to Jerusalem, as a believing Jew, he will spend a lot of time on the Temple Mount.
Where did Jesus walk? There's no question he walked on these steps, because this is the main entrance to the temple.
When Jesus turned upside down the tables of the money changers, they fell upon some floor. We have that floor. We have those floors upon which Jesus could have walked.
You don't want to believe what's written in the Bible? Fine. See what archaeology is teaching you.
Well, Aaron Zimmerman is the writer and director of Written in Stone, and it's the latest in a long line for her of Emmy-nominated features from CBN Films. And Aaron, I've lost track of the number of times you've been nominated for your writing and directing, but welcome to the 700 Club. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Gordon. And it's 4.
It's 4. Okay. Well, let's look at the film and let's go right into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Why do you think that's the place where Jesus died and was buried?
Well, it's not really what I think, it's what history thinks. And in the film, we go way back to about 100 years after Jesus. About AD 132, the Romans invaded Jerusalem and wanted to just completely decimate it. They wanted to erase the memory of the Jews. And what ancient societies did is when you conquer a country, the first thing you do is you go to their holy sites and you knock them down and you build your own temple there. So the Roman army comes in and says, where are the holy sites? Okay, number one is the Temple Mount. So great, they build a temple there. The other site that they were given is the area where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is now, where Jesus' tomb was. And so they said, all right, and they kind of did a double insult. They went there and they built a temple, and then they put statues. They put one statue on top of Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified, and then they put another statue on top of his tomb. So that pretty much says to me the Romans wouldn't put all that time and effort into building a temple and doing all of that in this kind of place that was a little bit outside the city if it were not an important spot.
One of the surprises for me in all of that is the graffiti that was found literally on the wall of that Roman temple. Tell us about that.
Yes, graffiti has been our friend in the ancient world because it's told us a lot. Down at the bottom of the Holy Sepulchre Church, and you kind of have to get permission to go down here, is a piece of graffiti, and it's a drawing of a ship. And that ship has been looked at by every maritime expert out there, and they've all said this ship belongs to the 2nd century, which is 100 years after Jesus. So it's very early. And keep in mind, the church was built 200 years after that. So this graffiti is 200 years older than the church, which means that it was inscribed on the Roman temple. Now that's pretty gutsy. And under the ship is a phrase in Latin that says Domine Evimus. It means, it can mean two things. It means, Lord, we have arrived, and Lord, we have gone. It's kind of like a double use. If you say, are you going to the party or are you coming to the party? It means the same thing. So that's kind of an interesting double meaning. You think that Christian pilgrims might have come here saying, Lord, we have come. We've come to this place where the greatest thing in human history has happened. And it can also mean, Lord, we are going. You know, we're fulfilling the Great Commission. We're going on this ship and we're going to spread the gospel. So it's very interesting. I'm shocked that it survived the destruction of that Roman temple, and it's actually older than church. So that shows us that at least 100 years after Jesus died and rose again, people are seeing that as a holy site.
Up next, more from Written in Stone, Jesus of Nazareth, about Bethlehem and a surprise discovery. We know Jesus was born in Bethlehem, but can archaeology tell us exactly where? Here's CBN CEO Gordon Robertson and writer and director Aaron Zimmerman again talking about Written in Stone, Jesus of Nazareth.
Well, let's turn to Bethlehem, and one of the most beautiful churches I've been to, and certainly it's the oldest church in Christianity, the Church in the Nativity. What does the film say about that?
We go back all the way with this one, too. We go back to 100 years after Jesus was born, to the 2nd century, to one of the church fathers named Justin Martyr. He went to Bethlehem and he inquired of the locals. He wanted to know where was Jesus born. And the locals took him to this cave, this spot that is where that church is now. So 100 years after that, another church father named Origen went to that same spot. Now, this is 100 years apart, and the locals are still showing him the same exact spot. And now, 100 years after that, Constantine's mother, Helena, has come to the Holy Land, and her son, the new emperor, has said, find all these holy sites. So she goes to the locals and says, where is the spot that Jesus was born? And they show her the same spot. Okay, so that's 3 Christian people that have documented it. Now we'll go back to the Romans again. I said earlier that they built the temples on the holy spots. Well, they went out to Bethlehem and they built a temple to Adonis on the spot of Jesus' birth. Now, Bethlehem was a backwater. There was no reason that any Roman temple should be there. It had no importance. It was a tiny little village. So why would you go to all the trouble to build a giant pagan temple if that was not considered a holy spot? So we're going back to the early history, and as you said, it's the oldest church that's been in continuous use. So the tradition is great there. Now, can we say inside the church there's a little star on the floor in the cave and it says Jesus was born here? Can we say that's legitimate? No. But we can say somewhere on the grounds of that church, that was the home of Joseph's family.
Let's turn to what I consider one of the surprises. I've been to Israel many times, going all the way back to 1969. And I didn't know about this one. It's Zion Church. It's right in the middle of Jerusalem. What's the significance of that?
You get on a tour bus in Israel, and it is not going to take you here. It's on Mount Zion, the place where the upper room, or the place that they consider to be the upper room on Mount Zion. If you go just a few steps out, kind of toward a parking lot, it's a bit strange looking. There's sort of a cage over it because people were throwing trash down in it. But you go underground, and it's this combination of synagogue and church. You walk right in. Down the steps is a mikveh, which is a Jewish ritual bath, and which we believe they later used to baptize people in. And keep in mind, most of the believers at that time in Jerusalem were Jewish. On the steps, and there's a little sort of a gathering room, and then there are underground tunnels, and there are trapdoors, which tells us, number one, that was constructed in a time of persecution when they felt like they were going to need a way of escape because somebody was going to come and stop them. And number two, the plaster down there that is on the walls does date to the 1st century, which was shortly after the time of Christ. So that could be, there's a strong tradition on Mount Zion that that's the place where the Last Supper took place, and that's the place where Pentecost took place. So there was, from very early on, the Christians considered that to be a significant place. And so this again is not something you're going to see on a tour bus, but if you go to Israel with me someday, I'll take you.
All right. Watch out. People will take you up on that. All right, Aaron, thank you for being with us, and thank you for all that you do, the writing, the directing, these wonderful films. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Up next, Scott Ross tours Magdala, the hometown of Mary Magdalene, on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. What started as a vision to build an affordable guest house for pilgrims in the Galilee grew into one of the most extensive archaeological sites, providing a colorful picture of life at the time of Jesus. CBN Scott Ross takes us to Magdala, the ancient city many believe was the home of Mary Magdalene.
Located on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, Magdala sits at a crossroad of Jewish and Christian history.
Magdala is very significant already just in general culture. One of the most known figures of Christian discipleship is Mary of Magdala. What's the importance of Magdala for the Jewish people? It's a 1st century town and a very significant excavation in the 1st century for the Jewish culture.
In 2005, Father Juan Solana initiated the Magdala Project to highlight the ministry of Jesus and an opportunity to honor women of faith. They broke ground in 2009, and what happened next, Father Eamon Kelly describes as providence.
We bought this piece of land, and then to find it in Magdala, the land, and not just on any hill around the Sea of Galilee. And then you start digging with 2 prayers. Lord, spare us from archaeology, because it's an expensive hobby. And then a big delay for all the project. The second prayer was, if you do give us archaeology, give us something good. And so we find this incredible discovery of a 1st century synagogue.
Seated in the synagogue, Father Kelly told me about some of the features that make it so amazing.
So we're in a very big room, and we see it's organized with 2 rows of seating here in the central part, and we have another row of seating inside the outer walls. This is a space that's not a family home. It's a very ornate community room that has this mosaic and the frescoes, and the mosaic has 2 parts, the rosette mosaic with the 3 colors, but now the specialists are telling us there are 26 colors in the mosaic, and then we have the unending pattern, which shocks some people, but they say this was also in the temple in Jerusalem. And then we have the Magdala Stone right bang here. This is the place where we found it. Now this and the one out there are copies, It's considered and treasured by many archaeologists on the level of the Dead Sea Scrolls in terms of archaeological importance.
Archaeologist Moti Aviam proposed the theory of the Magdala Stone, resembling the Second Temple of Jesus' day.
And I suggested that what we have here is some kind of a model, symbolic of the temple in Jerusalem. We have the menorah, we have the altar, the golden altar, we have the showbread table, and we have a scene into the Holy of Holies.
Because of the commandment against graven images, Aviam says the choice was to portray God symbolically in a divine chariot.
As it is in the book of Zechariah and many other books from the Second Temple period, which gives us a description of the chariot on which God is riding.
So what is the significance then of Magdala, going back in biblical history?
Magdala today gives the largest view, archaeologically, of the time of Jesus.
While there's no physical evidence that Jesus visited Magdala, Father Kelly says the signs are there.
Scott, every day, every group asks me this question: was Jesus here? Was he in this synagogue? Was he in Magdala? And I say, we don't know because we lost all the videos. Jesus was surely present in Galilee, and this is on the path from Nazareth to Capernaum. There's a port here, and he's always crossing the lake. This is a Mecca for the Galilean Sea and fishermen.
At Magdala, the Duke Al-Azam Center is a place for people of different faiths to worship. Its Latin name is taken from Luke, where Jesus tells Peter to launch into the deep. The atrium is designed to honor the Jewish women who followed Jesus in the New Testament. 4 smaller chapels include mosaics illustrating biblical events. And in the boat chapel, a unique boat-shaped altar overlooks the Sea of Galilee.
When the gospel is proclaimed up there at the microphone, it looks like Jesus is preaching again to us from the boat. Imagine you're having liturgy here, prayer, and the boats are going by. It allows people to get into the moment of the gospel happenings.
And downstairs is the Encounter Chapel, where Father Kelly says he believes God is healing divisions between Christians and the Jewish community.
This is part of the road of the first century port. So you know the names of many first century fishermen? So who walked on this street?
Yes.
Now, if Jesus came to Magdala, I say he was more often on this street than he was in the synagogue, in our synagogue.
Magdala is staffed in part by international volunteers.
Sometimes you realize like you know very little of your faith, so this helps you to go like deeper inside and really to live all the things that you can find out in Israel.
I never been in Holy Land before, so it was taking a huge risk. It was very surprising to see what we think about Israel, the Holy Land, and coming here and seeing the reality.
And that guest house for pilgrims? It opened just recently. What's the vision for the future now?
We had to make quite a few adjustments because of the archaeological discoveries, which enriched the site immensely, enriched it with meaning. And then by finding a synagogue, a huge increase of the Jewish-Christian dialogue, and also the Christian-to-Christian encounter, because here we have a place where we were not divided. So where Providence is going to continue taking this in the future, I think we'll all be surprised, as we are every day.
Scott Ross for CBN. At Magdala in the Galilee, Israel.
Coming up, a look at the town of Nazareth and what it may have looked like 2,000 years ago. Several years ago, Israeli archaeologists uncovered a house from the time of Jesus in the town where he grew up. CBN's Julie Stahl has that story from Nazareth.
Most people only know about the life of Jesus from what they read in the Bible. Archaeologist Yardena Alexander says the discovery of this small house sheds much more light on how people live their everyday lives in the Galilee town of Nazareth.
What we can learn is a little bit about the lifestyle. I would say that certainly the remains that we have are very simple, and it reflects simple houses that must have existed in the small village of Nazareth.
The house consisted of interconnected rooms, a courtyard, and a water cistern. There appear to be no luxuries or imported goods. Remains of pottery and vessels found at the site also confirmed the Jewish character of the city.
There were probably about 50 homes in Nazareth at the time of Jesus. Some experts say because the village was so small that Jesus and boys his age likely knew the home and played in it.
Located at the heart of ancient Nazareth, The remains of the house are just across the street from another landmark, the Basilica of the Annunciation. Catholic tradition says this was the site where Mary lived when she was visited by the angel Gabriel, telling her she would bear a child, the Messiah. Also at the site is a pit that Alexander believes was dug out of rock as a hiding place.
I think that it was excavated by the people who were living in this house for the purpose of hiding from the Roman army at the time of the Great Revolt. We're talking now about 67 CE. This is the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans.
All of this was discovered because of plans for a new Catholic center. Throughout Israel, archaeologists go to a site before construction to look for history.
But these salvage excavations carried out by the Israel Antiquities Authorities are terribly important because you don't know what to expect, and very often you come up with very important finds which can tell us about life in the ancient days.
Center developer Mark Hodara wants to preserve the remains.
I think it's a gift for Christmas, because we are for Christmas. It's a gift for the center also, because many people would like to see the place.
Today, Nazareth is a bustling city of some 75,000 residents. Once a predominantly Christian city, it is now more than half Muslim. But even after 2,000 years, the city's fame still comes from the Jewish carpenter who grew up there. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Nazareth.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.